Well, I am tempted to come up, or I was tempted to come up here and say, diversity in country music, there ain't much of it, and then walk off the stage. But see, I thought it was funny, but okay, I'll just give the talk. Diversity in country music. Country music today in the 2000s, and this is it's not advocacy, it's not criticism. I'm going to give a little historical overview and kind of where we are today with country music and diversity. And country today is caught between business and sociology. And by that, I mean that a business has to make money. A business has to make a profit. A business has to bases what they do today on what's been successful in the past. Sociology involves issues of social justice, equality, opportunities, and those two are in a continual clash. And there are people with good intentions who are trying to do both, are frustrated and optimistic at the same time. First of all, I've got to tell you, historically, country music is not a pure breed. It is a mongrel. The essential roots go back to the British Isles, when that included Ireland as well as Scotland, Wales, and England. But we've had input from a lot of different cultures, a lot of different places as the music has progressed. It starts, the first commercial recording of country music happened in 1923. So it doesn't go back that long when you're dealing with, the history of the universe or even the history of the country. Now I'm talking about recorded country music, not just playing, but what's been recorded. And that's when Fiddlin' John Carson down in Atlanta did The Old Hen Cackled and the Rooster's Gonna Crow on one side, and Little Old Log Cabin down the lane on the other. And that let the record executives, people running record labels, know there was a market. And they considered that market a southern rural market. And the key word is market. They thought they could make money selling country records. And that first record sold over 100,000. And what they did was in those early days, they pretty much divided it into two markets, race and hillbilly. They divided it by race. It was called race music, it was called hillbilly music. There was other terms used, but that was basically the main terms that were used. And again, it was built on the southern white working class. And it was the black working class for race music. That was the division. I've got to say, from the very beginning, African Americans have participated and been part of country music. Not the dominant part, but part of it. About 1%, I'm throwing some facts and figures here, about 1% of 11,000 hillbilly records before 1933 were by African Americans. Very small percentage. Between 1924 and 1932, black and white artists collaborated on 22 racially integrated sessions. Now remember, this is during a period of time when it was a segregated nation. There's a black section of town, there's a white section of town. There were areas, in Nashville it was Jefferson Street. Atlanta, it was Auburn Avenue. Everybody's heard about the Tulsa tragedy by now. That was the black section of town. Prior to 1930, 14 different American artists recorded 43 known selections on hillbilly records. Okay. Small percentage. Prior to 1933, 49 African American musicians participated on recordings for at least 112 hillbilly masters. So in terms of percentage, there's some there, but not much. Early country influences, and what you hear, the main ones that you hear is Leslie Riddle, who helped A.P. Carter collect songs. He was an African American. He was good at remembering tunes. He was good at playing the guitar. And A.P. Carter would go on these song hunts and collect these songs for the Carter family to record uncopyrighted songs. And that's what built that whole peer publishing company and Victor Records. Rufus T. Tot Payne was African-American street musician down in Montgomery, Alabama. And Hank Williams, as they say, bugged him a lot to show him chords. And so he taught Hank Williams a lot of chords on the guitar. And the final one is Arnold Schultz, who was an African-American musician in Rosine, Kentucky, same place Bill Monroe was from, and supposedly introduced Monroe to the blues. And Monroe always liked the blues. And of course, that's the founder of bluegrass. 1930s, country music blossomed. It blossomed because it was on the radio. There were what they call barn dances, and we've got the remnants of one in Nashville now, and that's the Grand Ole Opry. They were really a variety show for a rural audience, and predominantly white. They were generally on Saturday nights, and R&B or blues music or race music did not blossom during the 1930s because blacks had very limited access to the radio. They did not have the equivalent of barn dances in the African American community. One of the things that surprised me in doing research through the years is how many R&B artists, I would talk to some R&B artists, interviews and whatnot, how many of them grew up listening to country music? I was shocked. James Brown, soul brother number one, played the Grand Ole Opry. He wanted to play the Grand Ole Opry. And the reason was that that's what they heard growing up on the radio. They heard the big band pop stuff, and then they heard country music. In Nashville, there were two African-American performers on the Grand Ole Opry back in the 40s, 30s and 40s. One was DeFord Bailey, who's now in the Country Music Hall of Fame. He played harmonica. And the other was Bobby Hebb. If you remember that song, Sunny, dun, 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 dun. Anybody heard that song? Anyway, he did that, and he was a dancer. He and his brother and another guy did what they call the typewriter brothers. They would tap dance. But he played performed with Roy Acuff. 40s and early 50s, a very important A&R guy was African American, and that was Henry Glover. He was with King Records out of Cincinnati. He produced a number of R&B acts. He produced a number of country acts. And one of the things he did is, hard thing to find is a hit song. Hit song in R&B, cut it country. Hit song country, cut it R&B. That's given, Sam Phillips at Sun Records given credit for that, but it was really Henry Glover and King that did that mostly. And that's a picture of Henry Glover. And he moved around a bit after he left Cincinnati. Now, after World War II, here are the African-American artists who have been on the country charts. We start with Charley Pride. And Charley Pride, 67 chart singles, 28 number ones. Charley Pride comes along in the 1960s in the midst of the civil rights struggles. It's not a stretch to say that the white Southerners were not happy with civil rights or integration. And here steps in Charley Pride. And Charley Pride was a key bridge. He wasn't an activist campaigning for civil rights, but his presence, the fact that he could win over a white audience, said a lot, and probably, well, it did. It advanced civil rights a great deal in a more silent way. Linda Martell was signed. She did not have many chart records. Her hit was called Color Me Father, which would have been an R&B hit that they cut country. She was an early African-American performer. O.B. McClinton had 15 chart singles, signed to a Nashville label, Enterprise Records. Ruby Falls had 7 chart singles. Big Al Downing, 15 chart singles. So there's a black presence in country music. Stoney Edwards, 15 chart singles. Cleve Francis, 4 chart singles. Reese Palmer, ooh, there's an echo. Reese Palmer, 3 chart singles. Mickey Guyton, 4 chart singles. Cowboy Troy, 2 chart singles. Lil Nas X, 1 chart single. And this brings up, in terms of the future of country music, social media. Lil Nas X wouldn't have stood a chance to get on country radio back when you had the gatekeepers. But with social media, he could have a #1 country song. Pointer Sisters, they won a Grammy Best Country Vocal Performance, a song called Fairy Tale. Duets was a way that a white performer could bring in a black performer. And we have Anita Pointer with Earl Thomas Conley. They had a hit single. Lionel Richie performed with Alabama and with Little Big Town on some of his hits. Ray Charles with George Jones and Chet Atkins, they had a #1 single. Their song was I Didn't See a Thing, which very humorous. You have Willie Nelson and Ray Charles, 7 Spanish Angels. You have Tim McGraw and Nellie. That was not a chart record. You had Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg, which did not chart, but it caused Willie and Snoop Dogg to smile in a certain way. Latin acts. Freddie Fender, 21 chart singles, 4 #1s. Johnny Rodriguez, 6 #1 hit singles, 45 chart records. Rick Trevino, 1 #1 record, 15 chart singles. Trini Triggs, 4 chart singles. So there's been some diversity. Now with Freddie Fender and Johnny Rodriguez, they sang partly in Spanish and partly in English. And it proved that there was a big, big Latin market for country music. The problem was the executives on Music Row, for the most part, couldn't speak Spanish. And so when that language becomes a barrier, how are you going to communicate with your artist? And so we haven't seen another Latin superstar come along, and that's a major reason why. Current active artists on the country charts, African-American artists, Darius Rucker and Kane Brown and Jimmy Allen, all of them doing pretty well, getting hit singles, getting radio airplay on country radio. Why will a Music Row executive sign an African-American act or not sign the act? And here are the reasons. The business reason, they will be held accountable if the act does not sell. Now, white acts don't sell either, but it's an easy thing to blame. Well, of course they're not going to get airplay. African-Americans aren't going to get airplay. Success of Charlie Pride, there have been a number of African-American artists, and I've showed you the pictures and showed you how they've done, but nobody has achieved the success of a Charlie Pride. So business says, well, maybe there's only room for one Charlie Pride. Reasons for, sociology, here we go back to, it's the right thing to do. Whoops. And the other one is they want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We tend to think that people are against us and people are, fighting against us. There's a whole lot of people with good intentions. I mean, look at our political divide. Both sides think that they've got something positive to say on the future, and some people agree with one side and some people agree with the other. So, but what you're finding is there's a lot of good intentions out there. Many agree that diversity is good, it's necessary, leads to a better society, more creative, more engaging, helps us with understand other cultures as well as those who are different. The problem is, and the problem is deep within all of us, is that human nature, we like the people who look like us, think like us, talk like us. It's a natural thing. Diversity does not just happen. It's got to be constantly nurtured. And that takes work. You don't just come home at night and drop down in front of the TV and not think about things. You have to be making a concerted effort to encourage diversity. Country music has always been diverse. Question is, but has it been diverse enough? There was a study done by Jada Watson, who's a female professor in Ottawa, Canada. And here's what she found, and you can read this. Black, Indigenous, people of color, short to BIPOC. They have airplay, based on airplay, CMA awards, ACM awards, charting singles, make up less than 4% of the country music industry. Receive 2.3% of country airplay. Of that figure, 96% are men, women less than 3%. Now, in country music, the audience is mostly female, and they tend to like male singers, okay? It's difficult to get a female played on country radio. And you can debate the justice or injustice of that, but that's the way sales have fallen for quite a while. Songs by women, 0% of black women reach the top 20. Country radio played 11,484 songs during a roughly 18-year period. Roughly 1%, or 133, were by black artists. 2.3% of ACM awards and 1.6% of CMA awards were people of color. So the odds have been stacked against people of color for a number of years. CMA did a study on the multicultural opportunity. What about the future? Are things going to change, or are they going to stay the same? 6 in 10 adults listen monthly to country music, 5 in 10 of non-whites. When asked, Black, Latin, Asian folks, why they didn't listen to country music, they basically said, just not into it, not top of mind, can't relate to the vibe. The core listeners have been more diverse, by and large. Future demographics. Past decade, multiracial population grew by 30%. White population declined by 8%. And this is looking towards future of demographics. Whites will be 55.8% of the American population, blacks 13%, Asians 6.9%, Hispanics 21%. That seems to indicate a more diverse country music listener. In 2060, whites will be less than half the population, 44%, blacks 15%, Asians 9.1%, Hispanics 27.5%. So it looks like demographics is going to increase diversity. Baby boomers grew up in the era of integration, of the voting rights laws, of that whole civil rights struggle. They tended to like R&B and Motown. Millennials, 80 million, born during that time, supportive of gay rights and equal rights for minorities. They open to new ideas, ways of living. Generation Z, now here is born in 1997 to 2012. Some of y'all are sitting in this audience are in Generation Z, in fact, most of you, will soon become the largest group of consumers, ethnically diverse, are social justice warriors. See if this applies to you guys. Particularly interested in inequality and climate change, most racially and ethnically diverse group, supports social movements such as Black Lives Matter, transgender rights, and feminism, demographics show progress and change and the potential for a new world. It's up to you guys. You're the future. Millennials are 8 million, supportive of gay rights and equal rights for minorities, adapting quickly to the world around them, receptive to new ideas, but it's your generation that's going to be the agents of change. Whoops, I meant the wrong way. Country music has always been diverse. Has it been diverse enough? Will a music originally marketed to a white Southern audience be country music if it's diverse? Identity. Question with identity. That same identity has hit rap music. If y'all may remember when Eminem came on the scene, there was that question, will it really be who we are if we've got a white guy singing? Will country music's historically white audience abandon it if it is diverse? Nobody has the answer to that. Country has always followed the market, presented music that appeals to a broad audience, has the widest demographic of any genre, and it's like 6 to 96. They cover everybody with country music, which no other no other genre of music has that. Conclusion, and this is my conclusion. There will always be a country music, even though it will not be exactly like the country music of the past. And that's certainly been true through the years. I have more years than you guys. And you're always, because what happens is you latch on to a music when you're about 14 years old, 13, 14, along in there. And like you've never latched on before. You've heard music, you've liked music, but it becomes a soundtrack of your life. It becomes identifiable in your social circle. It is just extremely important part of your life. And then as you get older, well, first of all, no music will ever sound as good as the music you hear between 13 and 20. You probably have parents or grandparents, and they'll listen to something you're playing, and now you want to hear good music, and they'll name an artist or they'll name a song, and if you trace back, it was a hit when they were between 13 and 20. And so we see that over and over again. We see it as country. It ain't real country. You know, that ain't the country music I grew up with. And we hear that over and over again. And it isn't. I mean, the country, Luke Bryan does not sound like Hank Williams. He doesn't sound like Buck Owens. He doesn't sound like Waylon and Willie in their heyday, but it's still considered country music. So that's what I've got to say. Thank you. Yes?
Is there anything that you hope country music does hold on to, or that you'd like to tell the future generations?
The self-image, of course, the self-image of jazz is the musically superior. They know great music no matter what the performer looks like. They're the cool people. Classical, they believe they're sophisticated and cultured. And rock is the rebels, the youth, the energy. And country is down-home folks. We're just ordinary people. And I think if you hold on to that to me is the core of country music. No pretensions, tell it like it is, down-home folks. So I think that's a core of what makes country country, and that should remain the same.
You've written a lot about this topic. What got you interested in it, and has kept you interested in it for your whole life?
Well, I grew up during the 60s in that civil rights era. And it was pretty easy to see the injustices. I grew up in a very racial world, a divided world. The school I went to was not integrated until I was in my senior year. So I went to segregated schools through the 11th grade. And and just to see the things that shouldn't be, people being treated the way they shouldn't be treated. And of course, it was in the news and on TV every night. So just that background of that. And the other thing, it's kind of odd. Southerners tended to dislike the group, but they liked individuals. And so you see, I had black friends, and at the same time you're living in a world that the overall black community, there was a dislike and a hatred there. And that never made a whole lot of sense to me, but that's, just part of that. I've just been trying to be part of the solution than part of the problem.
Seen any ways that help create that diversity, especially in like the country music world? So like any ideas that have helped, create it more diverse?
Well, the things I said, social media, which, they don't care what color the artist is getting the streams. If there's a lot of streams, then they'll get signed. And the other thing is the demographics. It's such a diverse population now. It's mostly young people. And that's, older generations are having a hard time with that. Girls with tattoos, black, whites in one family. All of that is, and I've got to say, it was difficult back in the 60s too, to have a black family sitting next to, a table next to a white family in a restaurant was not easy to get used to for the black family or the white family. So, but things have changed so much. I mean, we take that for granted now, no big deal. But the new generation, your generation, has just been open to more of those changes, and that's why they'll succeed. I mean, they got legislators passing laws against it now, against all these things now, but in the long run, it'll win out.
Have you seen anything, like any improvements for like executives on Music Row? Because you talked about them like not knowing Spanish for the Latinx community. Now social media is more so like my generation, but higher ups in like the music industry are still a little older. Have you seen any improvement in that aspect?
Well, the way music in general used to be marketed, you put out a single, you get it on radio, you coverage in the media, and if that's successful, it leads to a hit album. And people would pay $15 for a hit album. That has not disappeared, but it's a very small way to go about things. And country is still with that model to a large extent. Country radio is more important. Y'all will all tell me you don't listen to radio. A few do. Radio may be making a comeback. I don't know if you keeping up with some of the news. All these bots are driving Spotify and all these folks crazy because they're not generating real. What's real and what's not. Who's getting streams and who isn't. But with radio, you can count the airplay. So it may be time for another radio resurgence. Did I answer your question? No, probably not.
We were just talking about like executives on Music Row.
Yeah. Well, they have good intentions. They want to do the right thing. It's just, they're caught on the business side of it. They need to see what works. They need to see stuff selling. One of the criticisms in the black community is black artists are signed, but not black executives. That you need more African Americans behind the desk and is part of the business community. As it is, a black artist mainly puts together a successful one, a white team. They'll have a white manager, road manager, even down to the backing musicians. And that until that diversity filters down or filters up to the executive offices and the road crews, we're still with the Charlie Pride model of African American on stage, but the whole support team is white. More questions? Have I made anybody mad? Well, I'll say thank you again. Appreciate it.